we? CCLA, difference what? Difference makers, greatness clap. Hey, greatness clap. You're the difference makers and it don't stop.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you. We've got the green light to be able to go. I'll go ahead and share a story that Doug and I experienced this past weekend. We were doing a keynote in Alaska and had a couple of thousand people that were there. Got there early, checked out all the technology. We're good. Had their own, welcome, and they presented an award and all of those sorts of things. And then they quickly switched out our laptop that we were using for our presentation, and nothing worked. Nothing worked, right? And Doug very quickly has the presence of mind to say, I want you to imagine what this slide that Nancy worked really hard on looks like, right? And we did that for about 10 minutes, not asking everybody to imagine every slide. But and there were several people who said that was great. And I'm like, have you ever been a classroom teacher? Have you ever been a classroom teacher, right? When things don't work, you don't stop the show. You just keep going. You figure out another way around. So welcome to all of you. I'll start by just offering that this PowerPoint is posted on our website. You definitely don't need to download it for the purposes of our time together, but it is all available there for you. And it's actually a PowerPoint. It's not a PDF. So the only thing that we ask is use it for good and not evil. But please feel free to be able to use any of these materials in order to be able to carry back messages and so on. So now I'm actually not going to ask you to imagine what a slide looks like, but rather I'd like for you to imagine, for those of you that drove in this morning, for instance, to imagine that you drove in and you only used your rearview mirror. Imagine what that experience would look like, right? I do think you'd get really good at being able to explain car accidents. I do think that you'd get really, really good if that's actually the way you drove, right? It's problematic, of course, to navigate when you're only looking behind at what happens. Unfortunately, what can happen for some programs for multilingual learners is that they take a backward view. What are the things that have already happened? What are the gaps that exist? Without necessarily balancing that with looking forward. Where is this student going? Where is this student moving in the next month, for example, in terms of his or her academic experiences? And what really effective programs are able to do is to make sure that they have systems in place that are anticipatory and not just looking through the rearview mirror all the time. We have to look through the windshield, and we have to keep an eye on what are the things that have already occurred or where those gaps are and so on. And that's a real balance. That's a real tension that can happen in any kind of programs. It can be, let's look at all the things this student can't do and work from there without necessarily balancing it with what are the things that we anticipate, that forward thinking kind of look. And what can happen is the impact of what are otherwise really good multilingual programs can be compromised. And they get compromised in a couple of different ways. They get compromised when there's too much rearview mirror and not enough windshield. You have to have a balance of both of those. Another way that they get compromised is when the approaches, the services that are being offered to students are incoherent from their standpoint. And a third way that design problems can get in the way is when we're not paying attention to incremental success criteria. By incremental success, I'm going to refer to something that most of us have experienced, the Disney line, because that is incremental success at its very best. So again, imagine you're in that Disney line. You know those lines where you go like this, and then you turn, and you go like this, and you turn. You know those lines, right? In the 1970s, Disneyland opened a new ride, Space Mountain. Space Mountain was an immediate hit. It was such a hit that the lines across the park were really, really long. And it became something that not only interfered with the other park operations, but it left people feeling frustrated. And of course, if there's anything that Disney doesn't want to do, it's to create any kind of frustration with their customers. So the Disney psychologists, and yes, there are Disney psychologists. It's why it is that we buy all the things that we buy, just so you know. Disney psychologists started working on a variety of different ways that they might be able to not only increase the ability for the park to be able to operate, but also to reduce the frustration that people were having. And they came up with those Disney lines. Now, what's that have to do with success? Everything. Incremental success. The lines were just as long, but now they occupied a smaller footprint. They didn't go all the way across the park, right? And they got me to reward ourselves. Here's how it works. We're walking. We get to turn and we give ourselves a mental M&M, success. And we walk and we turn, mental M&M. We reward ourselves for success. Success is no longer defined singly as being able to get on Space Mountain. That's the big success. But in the meantime, there are all these opportunities. There are 10, there are 15, there are 20 little successes, little rewards that you experience, and it reduces your anxiety, it reduces your frustration, and it actually feeds into your ability, your willingness to persist. Now, I'll turn this over to you for a quick conversation. What do you believe that story has to do with multilingual learners and their education? For those of you that are online, I'll ask you to drop some ideas in the chat. For the rest of you that are here, what does that story have to do with multilingual learners? This is when you get to turn your head, you get to move your mouths, you get to do all that good stuff. Please take about 30 seconds to finish your thoughts. And I'd like to welcome you back. Learning a new language is like Space Mountain, all right? What does that story have to do with multilingual learners? And Karen, I know you've got a comment from our online participants. Love to be able to hear that.
All right. We had Sarah online who said, we need to build lots of small wins into the curriculum and find ways for students to measure success as they are building towards being able to access grade level content.
Love that. Love that. Snaps for Sarah, who wants to build or suggest other ideas that you came up with. I'll come around with the microphone so that the online folks can hear as well. You know, I work at teacher school, right? So I know all about wait time. Please, hang on one second.
We were talking about, I reflected about the story, was that it was very intentional. So the lines and, changing that system was based on a problem that they detected. So it wasn't something, an off idea or an opinion, but more based on data. They had a specific problem statement they were trying to improve, and then they collected data to see if it was improving or not.
What a great insight. Thank you for that. You're exactly right. I mean, isn't this at the heart of education? Is being clear, what is the problem we're trying to solve? What is the problem we're trying to solve? I love that. I love that. So if you've hung around with Doug and I for long enough, you know that we always have learning intentions and success criteria. Our learning intention today, we're learning how to integrate AI into responsive, strengths-based, multilingual approaches to learning. AI, got a few tips for you there. Success criteria. I can explain the difference between through the windshield and rear view mirror work. We need a balance of both. And I can name at least 2 ways AI can help my team to be able to see patterns for instruction. So that's the place that we're headed today. Not strictly Multilingual 101, but how can we partner with AI to be able to leverage what it is that we know help us to be able to see? So a couple of places to kind of put a stake in the ground. Multilingualism is additive. It's not a problem. It's not a deficit. It's not a problem that we have to solve, but rather we see that as additive. We see that as assets that students bring to the classroom, and it's up to us to be able to figure out how to build on them. Now, there are some misconceptions. Many of you working in the field run into some of these misconceptions that we help our colleagues to be able to understand. One misconception is that if they're all from the same family, they're all going to have the same cultural and linguistic experiences. At the school where Doug and I work, about 20% of our students are from Horn of Africa nations. There is a wide difference between what the older siblings have experienced and what the younger siblings have experienced. And then the parents are just trying to figure out their kids. We see these generational gaps, but also those gaps that happen inside of a generation. There's a big difference in terms of experiences. For example, when we have an older brother or sister who was born and spent their formative years in Somalia, for example, and the youngest brother or sister that was born here and has a completely set of different experiences, same household, but different experiences. So we can't treat them all as if, oh, you're from that family. This is exactly what your experiences have been. There is a misconception sometimes because I know at our school, we do occasionally get students who have some interrupted formal education. They've experienced something that has happened in their country that didn't allow them to be able to go to school. And there can be a misconception, oh, if they have interrupted formal learning, then we need to put them back with, the 6th graders, for instance, even though they're 15 years old, right? So that can be a misconception, and it's well intentioned, but it's also does a disservice to young people. And there sometimes can be a misconception which I think is kind of beginning to fade away. That if you're a multilingual learner, that you can't receive special education services. We know that there are some kids who absolutely have disabilities. They might be language disabilities or others, in addition to being a multilingual learner, or that they can't be in gifted ed. Right? These are challenges sometimes that all of us run into, and that can lead, those misconceptions can lead to some incoherence. When we talk about incoherence is at the systems level, at the school organization or the district organization. And it is often the product of really good people trying to do too many different things and not coordinating their efforts, right? Michael Fullen talks about the impact of incoherence at a school systems experience. Students who are in a system that is somewhat incoherent end up expending more bandwidth than they need to in trying to make sense of what it is that's happening. So it's really important as systems, school organizations as well as district organizations, to be able to understand why it is that we do what we do, how it is that we do it, and what it is that we do. Many people can describe what it is that they do in an organization. Oh, I'm a coordinator. I am a fourth grade teacher, et cetera, et cetera. They can identify the what. Fewer people within that organization can identify the how of what it is that they do. And even fewer can understand and express what the why is. Coming back to what the shared purpose is essential. Because when you know your why, the how becomes a lot more apparent, because the why grounds you in that. And when the how is apparent, the what, the result, what it is that we're looking for, becomes that much more apparent as well. Now, these ideas really hang out with what TNTP has called trajectory changing schools. These are schools around the country that have made at least 1.3 years worth of progress, average grade level responses, 1.3 years worth of progress for every year in school for at least 3 years in a row. There are 1,345 schools, K-8, in the United States that have that kind of data, which can feel kind of discouraging, to say the least. A lot of it has to do with coherence. Lots of people doing lots of really hard work, but not having those coherent experiences for students. In fact, what TNTP has identified is that what these schools have in common is an investment in a sense of belonging. A sense of belonging for students, a sense of belonging for the adults that work in that school organization, and a sense of belonging for families. The second is consistency, especially in having grade level instruction with supports, with scaffolds, and so on. And the third is around coherence, that especially for students who are receiving a number of different services, that those ideas all hang together. So I'm going to talk about a student at our school, Abdi. He is in ninth grade. He has been identified as being in the talented and gifted program, and he is a multilingual learner. He is learning English as well. His grade level last quarter centered on an essential question that went across all of the content classes: how do technologies shape the human experience? So this is something that Abdi and all of his classmates are experiencing. But Abdi gets a number of different language support services as a part of that. And so this is an example of what Abdi's work looks like, and it is coherent. In his ninth grade class, they were reading for a time Bradbury's short story called The Veldt, which is a great short story if you haven't read it. It's a horror story. It's about a technologically advanced home. Some of you are nodding because you know this story, right? And the children who live in it. Amazing that this was written in 1951. It really is, because it is like super creepy when you're like, oh, that sounds a little bit like my house. So that's what they were reading in his English class. And remember, keep in mind the essential question. He also receives intervention time as well. He previews the Veldt and maps Peter and Wendy's journey as they take command of the tech with deadly consequences. So in other words, he gets some windshield work. His interventionists know this is what Abdi is working on. So we're going to take some proactive, we're going to do a bit of pre-work to get Abdi ready for that quality tier 1 work. He also attends after-school tutoring. And in after-school tutoring, one of the things that he works on is fluency, reading aloud. He is not reading aloud random pieces of text. He's reading aloud and having those fluency experiences with passages from the Veldt, because you can take advantage of all of these ideas and coordinate what it is that looks like. And for homework, what he's writing are on one particular night, he's developing generative sentences that are related to vocabulary that is in the book. And he's those vocabulary words are central to him understanding what that is. If you're not familiar with generative sentences, here's vocabulary. We're learning vocabulary. Then we start to put boundaries on them in sentences. Use this particular word in the 4th position in a sentence that is at least 8 words long. And now what they have to do is not just think about what is the definition of this term, but they also have to think about things like syntax and grammar and composition and semantics. By the way, one of the things that we do with generative sentences is we go from the word, here's the word, to the sentence. We have them write a series of sentences with a couple of words. Now choose one of the sentences and use that as a topic sentence in a paragraph that you're going to write that summarizes that. So think of the scaffolding that's available there, not just for students who are multilingual learners, but for students who are reluctant in any way. We go from the word to the sentence to the paragraph, scaffolding them along the way. Our last kind of flag that we want to post in the ground is just a firm belief that all students have to have intentionally designed learning spaces, not just spaces that are convenient for the adults. The most dangerous phrase in the English language is, we've always done it this way, right? But really being able to be very intentional and as you noted, to be able to take a step back and to be able to say, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And can we be creative about that? So I'm going to turn this back over to you. I'm going to preview 3 big ideas that we'll have, and then I'd like you to just react. What is resonating with you? What is surprising to you? What resonates or connects? What was a bit of a surprise? So here are the 3 big ideas. And we'll start to explore those as well. But in my remarks so far, what resonates, what surprises? For those of you that are online, if you'd like to drop ideas in the chat, please do so. And I'd like to welcome you back. I like being able to do that from time to time, just asking what's something that you connect with or that resonates, what's something that surprises you, because that's learning in a nutshell. Learning always goes from the known to the new, the known to the new, the known to the new. The known is what helps to anchor the new. And so being able to reflect and go, here's some things I already know about these three big ideas that are coming up. Here are things I already know. And also being able to note, here's some things that I'm not quite sure about yet. Help you in that journey to go from the known to the new. So this is going to kind of organize the rest of our time together in particular. And what we're going to start to talk about first is around lesson design. We know from John Hattie's work with meta-analyses that lesson design has the potential to be able to significantly accelerate learning for students. Just to kind of interpret that, the average year's worth of progress for a year in school is going to scale right there at about the 0.4 level. By the time you get to 1.09, you are really accelerating what that learning looks like. Potentially up to and beyond 2 years worth of growth through lesson design, through lesson organization. So we're going to pause on that. You have paper that's in front of you. If you are the kind of person who likes to take notes, here's a little paper that you can utilize. And I'll show you how to do this. There's some folding that's involved. If you'd like to play along. All right, we're going to hold the paper landscape style, and we're going to do a hot dog fold. A hot dog fold, right? This is the language of children. It's also the language of Dinah Zeit, who actually invented hot dog folds and hamburger folds. Hamburger folds, you fold the other way, right? Okay, now I've got 5 things that are up there, which means we have to figure out how to fold this to get relatively even 5 sections. So here's what I'd like for you to do. And it won't be perfect, and it is absolutely okay. And there's more paper there if you need it. I am going to put my microphone down. So I'm going to stand over here near the, maybe, Karen's going to hold it for me. I love that. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your standard growth bone, which is the middle joint on your index finger. You see that? It's about 1 inch. Did you know that? No matter how tall you are as an adult, it's about 1 inch, right? And what you're going to do is you're just going to sort of line up 1 inch, 2 inch. I'm going to leave about 2 inches hanging off, and I'm going to fold so that I've got about 2 inches that's left over here. Can you do that? Can you do that? Now take that extension, and this time I'm just going to fold it back to get that out of the way. And fold a little hamburger fold you've got 5 columns. Right? And it's not even origami. And if anybody wants mine, if you're like, yeah, I'm all thumbs, you're absolutely welcome to have it. If you'd like to set up that note-taking device, here's a way to be able to do so. We're going to talk about task, inputs, responses, evidence, and support. That's our tires. That's our lesson design. And then down on the second half, if you want to make some notes about how it is that you might use AI to be able to help you with task, input, responses, evidence, and support. You totally can. You totally can. These are foldables. Some of you have utilized these as well. Dinah Zike, I'm just killing time while you're doing all of that. Dinah Zike is the person who invented foldables. She was a 7th grader with an undiagnosed learning disability, and she couldn't understand why she couldn't remember the things that she was learning in school. And so as a 7th grader, she started making these interactive foldables for herself to help her remember what it was that she was learning. Dinah's other claim to fame, she's actually a paleontologist. And if you've ever had those dinosaur balsa wood kits that you punch out the bones and you assemble it into a 3D sculpture, Dinah Zike invented those too. Amazing. All right. So do you have your note-taking guide? Are we good? Okay. All right. So as I noted, tasks, input, responses, evidence, and success help to organize all of this. They organize our instruction. But much like any tires, you rotate them. So I don't want you to get locked into the idea that first you have to start with tasks, followed immediately by input, but rather it's a way for us as educators to be able to organize that instruction using lesson design. And so we're going to kind of walk through that. We're going to take a look at a particular student that we're going to kind of follow through what it is that she does and what it is that her caring educators plan for her to do. Now, we're going to also use some AI. I'm going to make some AI suggestions as well. AI is something that can help us out with being able to navigate, to be able to track, to be able to create. And here's the really important thing. You got to have the human in the loop. Because, and I'll quote a colleague of mine at the university who said to me several years ago, treat AI like an intern. Tell the intern what it is that you want. Let the intern go and work on that. And then have the intern bring it back to you and you look at it. And if it's not what you need, then you tell the intern, nope, that's not right. Here's what I'm looking for. And you send the intern back again. AI is your intern. You are the one with the wisdom. You are the one with the expertise. But having an intern can kind of help you out a little bit with getting some of that early work done as well. And always keeping in mind that we build forward and we also look at those skills gaps. It's a balance of both of those. So I'm going to introduce you to Soraya. Soraya is a 6th grader, and we're going to follow her journey and how it is that the caring educators that work with her use tires and use AI in order to be able to support her work. And remember, again, you have all of these slides. All right. For example, if you want this to be a 9th grader, you make the revisions on that so that it resonates where it is that you're working and who it is that you're working with. So we're going to start with evidence. Evidence to me, it seems like a really reasonable place to be able to start. What's the evidence that I currently have about how it is that this student is doing? What are we noticing about how this student, in this case, Soraya, how it is that she learns, how it is that she engages, how is it that she makes meaning? And so her team, using the screening and diagnostic instruments that they have been using, they took all of that and they dumped that into AI. And they asked AI, what are some patterns that you're seeing? What are some trends that you're seeing? Now, is the team capable of doing this? Of course they are. Of course they are. But it can be useful to be able to have AI take a first pass at that so that you can, as a team, as experts, you can react to that. What AI said about Soraya in particular, based on those instruments, was that she had difficulty comprehending grade level text. She has limited morphological awareness. And what challenges her is to be able to translate her thinking into writing. A really important note here, right? There's nothing wrong with her thinking. What we're looking at doing is how do we build those skills that she needs so that she can share what her thinking is in lots of different ways. Now, around that evidence, because this caring team knows that we don't just pay attention to what the skills gaps are, we need to go talk with her teachers about what are her strengths, because we want to leverage what those strengths are. We want to build on that. For those of you who among you are middle school in particular, anybody in middle school, how about working with ninth graders? All right, right? So we get them from their receiving school, and we don't know them really, really well at those entry years, right? So it's really important. We got to go talk to their teachers. What are some things that you're already noticing? And what they found in talking with a couple of her teachers is that her social studies teacher in particular said she's on fire about some of the content that we're learning about. She's really interested in that, really performing well compared to some of the other classes that she was doing. That the teachers reported there are high levels of engagement, but she needs to understand why this is relevant, which pretty much sounds like every human being that I ever heard that walked the earth. We all want to know about what's this matter to me, right? She has a preference for fiction, which suggests that she's got some understanding of narrative coherence. She knows how to follow a story, kind of avoids the informational text, and she is totally willing to be able to discuss ideas verbally. Now, that kind of data don't necessarily show up on a screening or a diagnostic, but rather because we talk to others who know Soraya well to be able to get that information. So now the team has got some really good data. They've got some quantitative data about how her skills are and where some of those gaps are, but also too, what are some of the strengths that she brings to the class as well. And so they put all that in there. They told AI what it was that they were looking for, and they asked for some windshield kinds of experiences that they might create for Soraya. And what AI said, after obviously some back and forth, that leveraging her strengths to reduce cognitive load before the instruction begins is really helpful. That instructional priorities include previewing key concepts and vocabulary from upcoming social studies units. They're seeing that as a through line to be able to do so. Building familiarity with informational text structures before she encounters them in class, and using content so that she can find meaningful anchors for her language work. And what this looked like in practice includes lots of short, high interest informational texts that are connected to those units, discussion-based learning that helps her to be able to activate her background knowledge, use new vocabulary orally, and have some light writing expectations for there, especially using sentence frames, shared writing, and those sorts of things. Through the windshield, what are we anticipating that we can do so? And then it also gave some suggestions about some of that rear view mirror work, targeting language and expression skills. I'll give you a moment to just kind of glance through that. This gives the team a huge leg up in what it is that they want to be able to create for Soraya. And now what the team can talk about is getting busy with what it is that they know best, how to make this happen. Here's some other suggestions that are not related to Soraya about ways in which a team could use evidence and pose particular questions. So I'll turn this conversation back over to you guys. Do you use AI to be able to analyze data? Have you had experiences with doing that? If you have, please share what those are with your team. What are some benefits and what are some cautions about doing so, using AI to be able to do some data analysis? So I'll turn this to you. we got good conversation going. I'd like to welcome you all back. We were just talking about data privacy, student data privacy as a part of that. And so a volunteer is sharing her insights. There you go.
So we just thought about student privacy because you can't input their names or student IDs or anything like that when you put it into these AI programs. And so we were talking about how you have to kind of scrub your data to make it clean before you put it in there before you have AI spit out your information.
Exactly. And what you can use, I mean, if you want to go to this level, if you're using ChatGPT or using Gemini, those kinds of publicly available large language models, you can use something like a random number generator, where you are the only one who has that number for that student. It's not they aren't identifiers. But also important to note, too, that many of these screening and diagnostic instruments are themselves running on AI and will yield for you analyses of what results are either at the individual student level or with a group of students. And they've got those AI protectors that are in there already so that it doesn't become publicly available data. Does that make sense? All right. All right. So let's go on to the second one around success, right? Because you need to know as an educator what success is going to look like. Kids need to know what it is that success is going to look like. This is part of our organizational structures and systems in particular. And success criteria are meant to be able to assist with that, especially. And when it's incremental, when it's laddered, much like our Disney lines, that really helps to support students. At the school where Doug and I are, our class periods are 85 minutes long. Can you imagine waiting until minute 82 to find out whether you were successful or not, right? I don't know anybody that has that kind of stamina and motivation, right? So we want to make sure that we're sandwiching in there lots of different opportunities for students to see their success. For those of you that drove in today, you probably used your GPS to get here. Your GPS is filled with incremental success criteria. We call it turn-by-turn guidance. Make a right in 900 feet. Go past this light and get into the left-hand lane to make the next turn. And when you mess up, right, my lady says, calculating route. I'm like, I know what that means. That means I messed up, right? But that's how it was that you got here. And it gave you more confidence to be able to go in a more efficient kind of way because you kept getting feedback about you're going the right direction, you're going the right direction, you're going the right direction. You didn't feel a need to have to pull over at a gas station to go, am I going the right way to get to the county office, right? You could move there a bit more quickly. Here's one example from 10th grade biology at the school where I am. Incremental success criteria. There are 4 success criteria in those 85 minutes that build upon one another. Here's from 6th grade. And I'll show you what this looks like at the top. Students self-assess. Where are you at on any of the success criteria? I'm just starting all the way up to I am actively climbing. I'm feeling really solid about this one. Great feedback for the teacher, by the way. All right. This is also from my school. This is 10th grade, world history. When I took the picture, that's what it looked like in real life. And so I went ahead and translated it for you so that you could read it a little bit better. They were talking about this etching. So let's go back to Soraya. Let's plan some incremental success criteria for her. Here is a shortened version of the prompt that I used. Notice that I did not put identifying information there for her. Just simply describe that she's sixth grade multilingual learner. I had some other information that was in there. I'm just trying to make this a little bit shorter for you. You ask it what it is that you want to do, right? You give it some context. You give it some rules. She's learning about ancient Egypt and improving morphological awareness skills with content terms, and give an example. The success criteria should build on each other over a 25-minute lesson. Now, my prompt and my back and forth was a bit more involved in that, but that's the gist of what it was. And here's what I got. That's the through the windshield stuff. Here's the rearview mirror. Soraya is getting a lot of tier 2 support, some push-in support that is in her social studies class to be able to do a bit of small group work right there within the class. And here's the lesson that they were working on. Here are other prompts that you can use that have nothing to do with Soraya. Imagine, for instance, that you are supporting some kids who are at the bridging level. You're supporting some kids that are at the merging level. They're learning the same kinds of things, but the language needs to be either simplified or made more complex. Put in the success criteria that you have, maybe for the students who are at the bridging level, and then ask it, can you help me to be able to create some success criteria for students that are at these other language acquisition levels? So I'll turn this back over for some conversation. What are some advantages of having a chat bot prompt or produce some incremental success criteria? And what are the challenges around that? So I'll turn this conversation over for you. And I'd like to welcome you back. Welcome back to all of you. And Doug and I published some research in educational leadership last year about inviting AI to the PLC table. And one of the things that we found in the research that we did is that team members were much more willing to be critical, and I mean this in a very, very good way, to be critical when they knew that it was a chat bot that produced it. It gets really uncomfortable when it's, your colleague who teaches in the class next door, and you might be thinking, well, that's kind of dumb, but you don't really want to say it because you don't want to hurt her feelings, right? But when it's the chat bot that does it, people were more willing to be able to use a critical eye and to really be able to interrogate, revise, or just throw out altogether when it was a stupid idea to go with that. And it helps teams to be able to kind of speed up what their work is going to be, so they can get down to the business of, I got to revise this a bit, or you know what, this is great for the kids that are at the bridging level, but there's too much language that's involved for some of my other students. So I want to be able to have different versions of that. So let's look at input, because that's another part of lesson design. What instruction honors strengths while supporting growth? When it comes to input in particular, in other words, what it is that that teacher is doing, we got to show it, we got to model it, we got to make it clear, right? That's at the heart of input. Doug and I have been hanging out with gradual release of responsibility for lots and lots of years at this point. And I'm just going to take one slice of it, which is around focused instruction, kind of that input side of being able to make sure that students are getting the content that they need. And there are lots of different channels that can be used for input. Here is a not so exhaustive list of all the different ways that we input knowledge, information for our students. Lots and lots of different ways to do so. Now, if 48 minutes of the 52-minute period is spent on direct instruction, you got a problem, right? You can't just be input along the way, but it's a really important channel to be able to do so. Some things to kind of keep in mind when it comes to input. First of all, economy of language, right? Don't get too wordy about all of it. Make sure that you're giving them a bit of what's necessary and make cognition accessible. In other words, how do they see your thinking? Not just what you know, not just the brain dump. Here's everything you need to know about the War of 1812, but your thinking, how it is that you think about that particular content. So we'll go back to Soraya again. One of the best ways to be able to demonstrate your thinking is through think alouds, to be able to do that modeling and that thinking aloud. But, for all of us, I think we can sort of creep back into you statements. This is what you need to do, and so on. And so Doug and I asked the chatbot to help us script that out. And this was the prompt, a simplified version of the prompt. And here's what we did. First, we found a picture on Google image that would utilize some of those words that we had identified. And we said, script this out for us. Script out what a short think aloud would sound like. And so here's a version of that. An easy way to be able to develop think aloud. Here are other prompts that you could use. And again, not exhaustive. So quick little check-in with one another. How might you use AI for generating some new ideas for modeling within the subject? Those textbooks are filled with beautiful diagrams. Are we using them? Might jot that down on your note-taking guide. Some ideas that you have. Mm-hmm. Please take about 30 seconds to finish your thoughts. And just as a note, for those of you that are supporting colleagues who are new to the profession, for example, and maybe don't have as much experience with doing things like think alouds, this can be a scaffold for them as well to help them develop some things. Now, I am not suggesting that you are literally reading exactly what it is that's in the script, but it can be really useful to be able to just kind of read that, hear that from the viewpoint of I statements, being able to show your thinking. In this case, here's what I'm wondering about, right? And then remembering, hey, let's invite her into the conversation as well. So let's take a look. We're rotating the tires around tasks. What do we need students to do in order to generate the evidence that we need for our next steps lessons and so on? And so that's where tasks come into play. These are assignments, these are activities, things that students are doing. And the whole goal behind it is that they're doing something that's going to help them learn that content. It's not just compliance, right? And there are some things that can get in the way of tasks actually being able to produce evidence. They're not there just to fill time, right? Like, I just need these kids to be busy for 8 more minutes until we go to lunch, right? And what poor tasks do is they yield bad data, right? Tasks don't automatically tell us what it is that they need to do. When the tasks at whether it's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, if they're not aligned, it's because the task isn't yielding the evidence we need. So understanding what your evidence is going to be helps you to design tasks that are aligned to the evidence that you need. If the task can't generate the evidence, the task is the problem. All right. If you're, we're just handing a kid a shut up sheet and going, well, shut up. It doesn't necessarily give you the evidence that you actually need along the way. And that's where scaffolding comes into play as well in those tasks. Some scaffolding that we do is just in case scaffolds. For example, providing students with some sentence frames is one example. We're doing it in advance of, you might need this, so I'm going to have this available for you. And some of the scaffolds that we do are just in time scaffolds. We see that look of confusion, or they're stalling or they're having difficulty, and we step in and we're able to scaffold that. I'll show you one example. Don't be that teacher. Don't be that teacher. Don't just hand them a task and go, well, I'll stand by and see whether you're able to do this. Let's be this teacher. Let's be this teacher who makes sure that that child knows you belong here, that I have high expectations and I design learning so that you'll be successful.
Then I explained what a tuck was and how that if you wanted to use a during classroom, I could pick them up and down to you about that. So much higher that we added another math. Then we'll back to without this block, kind of practice what it feels like something practice. And then we'll do the drill together where you jump this piece back and then roll to the piece. The reason for that is because the first time I bottom on a back, but that's exactly where we're at to do. Once you're comfortable with that, I just feel a little bit less work each time and have a little more power.
Incremental success criteria, doing a lot of scaffolding along the way. The goal wasn't, as far as the teacher was concerned, the goal wasn't for him to be able to do a backflip. The child's goal was. Our kid's goal is to learn a new language, but we understand that there are steps that are along the way, and we want to make sure that we're creating lots of opportunities for success. I'm going to share one last one, and then I want to let you go for lunch. You have the PowerPoints. So that last one around responses, I'll leave that one to you. Let's plan a reading for Soraya. Here's the prompt that I use. Many of you are familiar with Juicy Sentences, where you parse sentences and you ask questions around those sentences, how those sentences are constructed, and so on. Here's the text that was AI generated. Now I want her to read that. We're going to read that together, a couple of juicy sentences, and I'm going to ask her a bunch of questions. Who depended on the Nile Rover? Who depended on the Nile River is what that's supposed to say. For what did they depend? What did irrigation mean? Getting her to go back into the text again and again to be able to see how it is that those noun phrases, those verb phrases work together. And this takes about 7 minutes to be able to do, can help to unlock a longer reading that students are going to do by getting them to pay close attention to that. Now, the AI generation that I also asked for was at the level for the interventionist. What should I listen for and look for that tells me she's learning during this? What should I listen for and look for that signals to me that she's not learning this? How am I going to know when to step in? How am I going to know when to scaffold along the way? And so an invitation for that would be, as we're coming to our lunchtime, how might something like that, what the interventionist is looking for, how might some of that help to support paraprofessionals, new interventionists, not just in delivering a lesson, but being able to know, here's some look fors, here's some listen fors that might signal to you when they're getting it, when they're not getting it, and how you might step in. I'm just going to say that the response part is really, really good. Here's the short answer on the response part. use your success criteria that I showed you earlier and move them from can I statements, I can statements, move them into can I questions for Soraya to answer. Can I do this? Can I do this as a way to be able to have some lesson closure? Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I'll put the URL back up here again. And in the meantime, walk, don't run, no pushing as you head on over to lunch. I will get this all up for you. And thank you so much. Tires. Here we go.